What is up, Insaners, and welcome to another video of the Fantasy Premier League 2022-23 season. In this one, guys, we're gonna talk about some key dilemmas, give you some final tips before the Game Week 8 deadline. So hit like if you enjoyed today's video, subscribe to the Insanely Football YouTube channel as well, keep watching, and let's get into it. Now guys, let's get into the first question for today. Should you play a wildcard in Game Week 8? Now with the news of 3 fixtures getting postponed for Game Week 8, I've seen a lot of managers considering using the wildcard chip this week. And I think it's still very team dependent, guys. If most of your team includes players from Liverpool, Chelsea, Man United, Leeds, Brighton and Palace, I think it might be a bit difficult for you to field a playing 11. Now in this case, guys, I think it's better to use the wildcard and sort your team for Game Week 8 and beyond. Now guys, the other scenario is that if you are short by 1 or 2 players, and maybe if you have players like Neco Williams or even Ward who don't have a high potential for points this week. Now in this situation, guys, I think it's essential to see what can be done with your free transfers and maybe even a couple of hits. Now despite that, if you can't get to a strong team, I think it might be worth to play the wildcard right now. Another thing to note is that this week's wildcard team might not be very different from the one in Game Week 9, guys, so you can take advantage of the blank fixtures and set up a strong squad for Game Week 8 and beyond. Now another advantage is that you might be getting ahead of FPL managers who will end up taking hits to field a whole team this week and then ultimately play the wildcard in Game Week 9. Of course, there's a flip side to this as well, guys, and you'll probably have to let go of your Liverpool assets who of course blanked this week, but they can still do well from an attacking sense in the coming games. I think one more thing is that you'll end up letting go of your Arsenal players on a wildcard this week, and I know it's not ideal as they have a decent game against Brentford, but the upcoming fixtures are a bit tricky, guys, and the wildcard definitely helps you get rid of them without taking any hits. So ultimately, guys, if you are far from the ideal team, at least in your head, I think using the wildcard should give you a lot of stability, but do make sure to list the pros and cons before hitting that wildcard button, guys. Using it in Game Week 8 instead of Game Week 9, it might leave you a bit exposed because some injury concerns that might come up over the international break, which can of course leave you in a tough spot. I think it's essential to look at your team, see what you're gaining and letting go, and accordingly take that call. Now let's talk about the next question, guys. Should we hold or sell Liverpool players this week? We all know that Liverpool have struggled this season with only 2 wins in the first 6 games in the Premier League, guys. They were also comprehensively beaten in the first game against Napoli before they won against Ajax in the Champions League. Now the tricky question is what to do with Liverpool players. Now we know that they've looked very poor defensively and I don't really expect them to keep a lot of clean sheets in the near future. Of course, with the return of Thiago and Matip, I think things are gonna get better, guys. But if you still own, if you are still one of those unlucky managers who own Trent and Robertson, I think both make a compelling case for selling this week. Robertson is injured right now and he might even get reduced minutes once he's back after the international break, guys. Now Trent is also worth selling if you don't have players like Cancelo and Trippier, guys, who look like better options in the short to medium term. Even a Reece James on a wildcard over Trent is not a wrong choice, to be very honest, despite him not having a game in Game Week 8. Now talking about the Liverpool attack, guys, and we have Mo Salah, the most expensive player in FPL, and he doesn't have a game this week, and I think it's worth moving on from him to a different premium option. Guys, I'm still of the opinion to keep that premium spot in midfield if Salah starts firing and you want him back. The ideal play right now can be to play KDB this week, then move on to Sterling from Game Week 9 to 11 if required, and then get Salah back in Game Week 12, guys, when Liverpool has decent fixtures, and if you've seen enough from Salah, of course there's an option to get him back in your FPL team. Now the other strategy, the alternate strategy here is to spread the cash and make significant upgrades elsewhere, guys, but be careful, guys. Overdoing it might make getting Salah or any other premium midfielder back in your team a lot more trickier unless you have a wildcard to play. I really don't trust options like Bowen, Maddison or even Zaha for that matter to get them all together and replace that premium spot. Now we have another attacker from Liverpool, guys, it's Diaz, and he's another option that I would probably move on from this week as there's some short-term punts like Kulusevski or Saka you can go for in case if you're not using a wildcard, that is. Now if you are using a wildcard, guys, then you can also go for different options like a Maddison who has decent fixtures. Yes, there's also Zaha who doesn't play this week and in Game Week 9 has Chelsea, but the long-term fixtures for Zaha look really good, guys, and there's some potential replacements in place. Talking about Darwin Núñez, guys, and there are replacements available there as well, guys. You can upgrade to a Kane if you have the funds, or maybe take a punt on him. If you're not convinced by Tottenham, guys, which could of course be a possibility, then go for options like Mitrovic or even Isak from Newcastle. Now let's talk about the next question, what to do with Chelsea players right now. Now many FPL managers have this dilemma around Chelsea players guys and what to do with them. Now we saw Potter taking charge of Chelsea in a 1-1 draw against Salzburg. But Chelsea continued to play a back three which was pretty much expected. With Fofana and Koulibaly, they were benched for this game. Now James, as expected, he played in that right wing back role guys. He was the most advanced defender. I think James is still a perfect hold for Game Week 8 guys, and even beyond for that matter. In fact, if I was wildcarding this week, I would still get or even keep James and just bench him for this blank game week. I'm not very sure about the other defensive options guys. Cucurella again, if you are on a wild card, I think you should sell him. For fun is an interesting one for me to be very honest guys. It might be too early to commit, but I think he can be a nailed option in that Chelsea team. And being the cheapest entry in that Chelsea defense guys, I think he can provide a lot of value if Chelsea can of course sort out their defense and start keeping clean sheets. I understand the fixtures aren't the most straightforward when we talk about the clean sheet potential, but I think an option like Fofana can still outscore players like Soufal, maybe Emerson, especially from West Ham if we are looking to target other defenders from different teams. I think it's a tricky decision guys, but I think it's worth bringing Fofana on a wildcard. Coming to their attackers, and I think all Chelsea attackers are an avoid for me at the moment. Now I want to see them for a couple of weeks before jumping on to anyone in particular guys. The fixtures are a lot better from an attacking sense. I think with Potter coming in, new options in attack can definitely emerge soon. There's of course one exception to this thought, so let's say if you already have a Sterling in your team and you can afford to hold him and then maybe place somebody else from your bench, do it this week guys. I think he's definitely worth it. He's surely been the best attacker for Chelsea. Let's say if you don't maybe trust Sterling or maybe you don't want to keep him, then you can sell him, you can upgrade to a Kevin De Bruyne this week, or you can even downgrade to a Zaha long term, especially if you are on a wildcard. Let's move on to the midfielders guys. What are the best midfielders to target in Game Week 8 with or without a wildcard? Now using the wildcard chip in Game Week 8, I think you probably would want to move on from players like Salah, like Diaz, even Pascal Gross, even Rashford for that matter. Now if you are looking at a short and a medium term window, I think you can replace Salah with KDB and then maybe Sterling if Chelsea starts playing really well. Coming to Diaz, and I think there are a lot of replacements in the Diaz price bracket guys. That's one of the biggest dilemmas for this week. Now despite so many options, there are no standout picks to be very fair, which is a bit surprising. We have Maddison from Leicester who's done okay, but the team is currently struggling guys. The only thing that is going on for them is the fixtures. They have a tricky fixture against Tottenham this week, but then they face Forest, Bournemouth, Palace and Leeds in the next 4. It's still a risky bet of course, but fixture wise he looks like the option to go for in the short term. Then we have Bowen as well guys, but West Ham hasn't really shown much in attack, plus Bowen has had no returns so far this season, so that's a bit concerning. They also generally play in Europa, I mean they are of course playing in Europa League this season, so I think there might be some tired players playing on the pitch for Hammers. Now Bowen is maybe not that because he didn't start in the last fixture in the Europa League. And one more thing that is a plus with Bowen is that he may be on penalties guys. The fixtures for West Ham, they aren't really spectacular. Everton and Wolves next can be tricky games, but then they have Fulham and Southampton after that, which definitely have a haul potential for Bowen. So I think it's a tricky one guys. He's still not maybe as appealing as a Maddison just because of the fixtures and because of not really doing anything from an FPL point of view so far guys. They also have a challenging game against Liverpool in Game Week 12, so I think that's also a bit concerning, and that's why between these two options I generally prefer Maddison. Now if you're looking at a slightly long term picture guys, and if you're okay navigating this blank, the Game Week 8 blank with a certain player, I think Wilfried Zaha is the player that I'm really interested in, and I think he's definitely worth going for, especially if you're wildcarding this week. I understand that he doesn't have a fixture this week, but then he has good games from Game Week 10 onwards guys. I mean even against Chelsea to be very honest, in Game Week 9, I mean he has the potential to score goals. We have seen enough to tell us that Zaha is Palace's main goal threat guys. He's their threat going forward, he's also on penalties. So if you can manage a strong playing 11 this week, I think he's worth a shot on a wildcard. If you're looking at short-term 1-week punts guys, then Kulusevski against Leicester is definitely up there. There are chances that Son might get a rest for this game, and that's my reason for not including Son in this particular option guys. Son has also looked quite average in recent games, and Conte might just decide to play Kane, Kulusevski and Richarlison together in the trio. Also Kulusevski not starting in the Champions League game guys, that also helps his cause, and I think he's a decent option this week. Now I know many managers are also considering moving from Arsenal players, especially on a wild card, and I think a last roll of the dice with Saka, that looks pretty good guys. Saka has been more involved in recent games, Now with managers retaining Martinelli, even with or without a wildcard guys, I think Saka could be an even better differential, and if you're looking for a 1 week punt against Brentford, I think Saka is definitely up there. Now another differential pick that could be really interesting guys is Saint-Maximin from Newcastle. Now he's back in training, but I'm not still very sure about him starting because there has been some rumors, there has been some information that he might not be ready for this week. But if he is guys, if he gets some inkling that he will start or he's okay to play this week, I think he's a great punt. There can be a haul in there guys against Bournemouth, who have not looked that great defensively and they do concede a lot of chances, so I really fancy Saint Max to get something for Newcastle, but he's very injury prone guys. I mean, even if he starts, there are high chances that he might be hooked off early or he might end up getting injured in the game itself, so that's the risk that you take. I think Saint Max from Newcastle this week is a great punt, a great 1 week punt to go for. Now coming to the final question for this week guys, should you play a free hit chip in case of no wildcard? I think there are better opportunities to use the free hit later in the season when we have bigger blank game weeks or even double game weeks to deal with guys. If you've already used your wildcard and you can only field about 6 or 7 players this week, I suggest you take a few hits and you get in long-term options for our FPL team. Now the bare minimum is having 10 players playing this week guys. I mean, if you can achieve such a team with a -4 or even a -8, I think a free hit is best saved for the later time guys. In an unlikely situation, let's say if you are taking a lot of hits but you're still stuck with low ceiling options like a Reed, Ward, Iverson, maybe a 4.5 million striker as well, and of course because of that you're also short of a playing 11, then I think in that case only a free hit is a better option guys. In most cases I would try to get the best out of this worst situation and then minimize the loss by planning for future game weeks. I mean, you can always look at long-term targets that you want for your team, of course who have a fixture this week, and I think in that case the hit also might be a bit justified. So guys, that'll be all from my side for this week. All the best for Game Week 8. I hope you found this video useful and you enjoyed this video. Hit like if you did guys. Subscribe to the Insanely Football YouTube channel for more FPL content. Now we'll be back for the deadline stream in a couple of hours. So if you still have more questions, more dilemmas, do join us on the deadline stream guys. I'll try to help you out. Sort your team for Game Week 8 guys. Thank you so much again for watching and I'll see you in Insaners next time.